Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired justice of the New York State Supreme Court. Kasim was a client of mine who was the human personification of a Doberman Pinscher. He had dark hair, narrow features, very handsome guy, but slender features, just like a Doberman has slender features. And he had dark, black, piercing eyes. He was about 5'10", 180, and lean and mean. He even had a dark complexion that was suggestive. I mean, his whole demeanor was suggestive of a Doberman Pinscher in a way. And just like a Doberman Pinscher, Kasim, he could be loyal, quiet, respectful, even obedient if he liked you and he respected you. On the other hand, he could tear you apart and enjoy the process if he didn't. Me, he liked because I was a boxer, and so we had respect for anybody who was in any kind of martial arts, I guess. And he was in awe of the fact that I had run the New York City Marathon. I ran a marathon in 1980, and it's 26 and small change miles. And he couldn't conceive of the fact of anybody running 26 miles. So he held me in some kind of awe, which was undeserved. I was a mediocre marathoner. I just struggled my way through in the middle of the pack in the New York Marathon. But he thought it was a big deal. And on a full-time basis, Kasim was married and had a little boy, and he was working as a lab technician full-time. And on a part-time basis, he worked in the disco owned by a friend of mine who was a retired professional boxer. And Kasim, for a short time, was a doorman / bouncer, but he wasn't well suited to the job. He had instantaneous violent reflexes. He went off in a flash to anybody who he perceived was disrespectful or even used the wrong tone of voice. He had no diplomacy whatsoever, and you couldn't put him on the front door. That was bad because it wasn't surprised that he was violent. What was surprised is how often he was violent. And my friend who owned the business found himself apologizing to people who had been smacked around or abused by Kasim at the door for little or no reason. But he didn't want to lose him and lose his ability also as a bouncer. So he switched him. He was wise enough to switch him to indoor duty, where his sole job was not to intervene or stop any fights from occurring, but to intervene when fights already occurred and they were already happening. And his orders were to go in and break up the fights. And the other bouncers, realizing his talents and his proclivity for instant mayhem and punishment indiscriminately, anybody around him would get hit. And they would let Kasim go in while the fight was taking place, and Kasim would chop up everything in sight with his karate skills, kicks and slices and chops and everything else. And in about 10 to 15 seconds, everybody would be stunned, and that's when the other bouncers would pounce on everybody and apprehend everybody and escort everybody out the door, and restrain them. And that's how they used to operate with him. Anyway, he came to my attention when he had some legal problems. And the first one that he had came about from a fender bender that he had. He got into an auto accident, and I don't know whose fault it was. It doesn't even matter. And I had to go and represent him in criminal court because what happened is the other driver got out of the car, and the other driver was in some manner, shape, or form experiencing some road rage, and he got the wrong guy in Kasim. He came out angry and mouthing off this, that, and the other thing, and Kasim didn't need any provocation. What little he needed, he got. And this guy found out what it is to open a basket and find a perturbed cobra there waiting to strike, because that's exactly what happened. He got hit, and he didn't know what hit him, and Kasim wrecked this guy in no time. He was a very harsh and vicious guy. He grew up in Montenegro, in the former, Yugoslavia. And he must have been a very, very hard scrabble upbringing. And he was sort of like a junkyard dog. He was mean. But on the other hand, if you showed him any kindness, he was overwhelmed with gratitude, which to me, he seemed to be starved for any kindness. I guess he grew up and he was totally deprived of any love or positive emotional feelings. So I don't know what if what he became as an adult was a matter of nature or nurture or possibly both. But it was very very sad in a sense. And his second brush with the law came in family court as a matter of domestic violence. His wife pushed his buttons and he overreacted as usual and smacked her around, and she went and pressed charges. And when I got him alone in my office, I chastised him a bit because I thought that's what he needed. And I said, "Listen, Kasim, that's your wife. I mean, all wives know how to push their husband's buttons. It was no big deal. And she's the mother of your son. And she was there for you when you were in trouble. She was the first one there. Help Kasim, help Kasim. She's a stand-up gal. She's very, very good. And for you, with your skill, and a man like you, to pick on a woman like that or a little kid, which you wouldn't do, is demeaning. I mean, it just brings you down. And I hope that was making sense to him. And he was very receptive to it. He was very quiet and thoughtful about it. And I don't know if it made a difference, but in point of fact, it all became meaningless because about 4 weeks later, Kasim was dead. And as I got the story, he was working at the club, and there was an altercation involving three guys and some other people, regular patrons at the club, and there was three guys who were strangers. They were the first-time visitors at the club. Nobody knew who they were. Nobody knew where they came from. And Kasim waded in and really pounded these guys out, and the other bouncers came and collared all the three guys, and with Kasim, they threw them out unceremoniously. He threw them out head first, out the front door of the club. Well, all was well and good until closing time. At 4 a.m., Kasim was in the parking lot. He was getting out late. As a matter of fact, the parking lot was deserted. Nobody was around. All the club goers had gone home. Most of the employees were gone. And Kasim was approaching his car when somebody came behind him and shot him in the head and nearly took his head off in the process. And I don't know if you'd call that an overreaction. I don't know what Kasim, maybe he would understand and he wouldn't think it was an overreaction, but it was an overreaction. And the fact of the matter is that Kasim was a full contact karate champion. And full contact karate has rules. Well, the street has rules too. And one of the rules on the street is there are no rules. And these guys apparently were bad actors. Bad actors being, in street parlance, the kind of people who you could abuse, and they would show up when you weren't ready sometime later, whether it be hours, weeks, or a month later, behind your doorway and lay waste to you in ambush. He was ambushed. And the one street rule that Kasim ignored, maybe even knew about, is that Smith & Wesson beats a Royal Straight Flush. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.